I'm live now. It said, "Are you sure you want to start the stream?" And it really had me wondering because it's almost 1 a.m. for me. It's the middle of the night. Not sure why I'm deciding to go stream right now. Um, and then we'll get started in just a minute with some coding. I guess it's a nice time for people to watch if you're in the United States, or if you're a total degenerate in Europe, like I am right now. I just arrived in Copenhagen like an hour ago. And I'm in this hotel with incredibly fast Wi-Fi, and it just really made me want to stream. This budget hotel that has Wi-Fi that's really fast. So let me just make sure that I'm actually live like I think I am. And we can get started with some code. Yeah? It's going to be a good night with a little bit of coding and 0 viewers. Or maybe 1 or 2 viewers. We'll see. I don't stress. It's just fun when people show up. And today, and by today I mean tonight, or 1 a.m. So today I'm going to be working on some code on a React Native app. I've been working, of course, on my startup Zerv, even while traveling. It's been a bit of a challenge to find good workspaces while traveling. But today I'm not going to be working on Zerv. I'm going to be working on something that's a total distraction. That's kind of for fun, kind of a collaboration. So let me pull up some resources for it, so I don't seem entirely unprepared. This is just like a loading screen, basically. Just hang on while I download the design for what we hope to build. And we're not going to get very much done because it's the middle of the night. But I'll show you what I've got started, and it's about nothing. And then I'll show you what we're going to build. Or what we're going to start on. So welcome to the one viewer who showed up, probably because I tweeted about it. And we're going to code on some React Native stuff. Feel free to say hi in chat. It's always nice when there's interactions. And where are my windows? Okay, so I'm starting a new React Native app that's kind of for the purposes of teaching people things, but also it's an app for someone who I want to sort of help get started coding and get started with their app, so they can hit the ground running. And the goal today, quote unquote goal, we'll see how far we get on this project. But we're working on a music app that has all sorts of stuff going on. And of course, the interesting thing that I want to mess around with is working on the gestures so that the music player can load in from the bottom. So here you can see we've got this is what it would look like at the bottom of the screen when you're browsing around through the app. But you can swipe up on that, or you can tap on it, and it'll go into the music player, which is what we see over here on the right. So we'll see how far we get. These designs are really nice. I haven't taken too close of a look, but they're really polished. I've got to say, it looks like a real sort of thing that you'd get from, I'm sure this was a professional designer who did this. And we're not going to be building most of it, but I'll show you what I've got started on the app. I've basically just gotten kind of to the hello world state in the app. I'm going to turn my voice down a little bit. And I'm not even running the app right now. Here, I can close all these windows. And so I've nicknamed it Romy Music because Romy is the guy who I'm working with on this. And yeah, we'll see how far we get. So we're in the directory for the project. All I've done basically is I've done some installations of things, and earlier on I did npx create expo app Romy Music. So this is how I created this app, and I haven't done anything interesting. I have some tabs open that kind of took me through it, but I walked into it, I started running it just with Yarn iOS, and I'm going to do that again so that we can see the actual app running. The quote-unquote app, the empty app. Yes, yes, yes. It'd be really nice if it doesn't have a red box. But all I was doing was copying and pasting some example code for the 2 different projects that we're eventually going to want to stitch together. And I mean the 3 different projects, because we're going to be using Reanimated to do some animations. We're going to use React Native Gesture Handler to hopefully do some swipe gestures, pan gestures, actually, as you can see here in the documentation. So one of the things that I did was I basically just came down to the bottom here where there's a code example. And the code example is not super clear because it's not inside of a component, but it should be. So anyways, I basically just made this code actually run, this example code. And it's also using Reanimated. So let me show you the app. It's loading. Okay, just in time. Just in time. So I've also been working on making the React navigation example. So because that's what's already loaded up, I'll show you the other stuff that I added. So in addition to Gesture Handler and Reanimated, I've added dependencies for React Native. So React Native screens, I want to make this a bit bigger. I've added some React navigation stuff. I used to work on React navigation, but I haven't in a while, so I'm going to be really rusty on all of this, and also I'm going to be like learning or relearning the animations and gesture system as we go. But basically I just copied and pasted the tab navigation, and then I also copied and pasted the native stack setup, so that way in our app you can see that we have, it's a little confusing because there's 2 headers. We can turn off the header that's being provided by the tab navigator in a moment. But so we've got 2 different tabs, and I'll show you the code. The code here is basically saying, okay, we've got the navigation container. We've got the tab navigator, which is a top level navigator. And the reason it's the top level, well, it's easy to picture that it's the top level because it's actually owning the header here. And inside of one of the tabs, inside of the home tab, we've put another navigator. And that navigator is also rendering its own header, no problem. And I've created a link here. So this go to profile, when I tap it, it goes to the profile. And this is a native stack navigator, so I should be able to swipe back. I think I'm not grabbing the actual edge of the screen, the edge of the page. Well, if I grab the actual edge, I resize the simulator. So I'm struggling a little bit with a back gesture. I'm not sure if that's a bug. Maybe it's because the native stack is inside of tabs. But anyways, if I tap back, it takes me back to home. And so let me show you the code for the native stack. So home stack is a stack navigator, and it has the 2 screens, the home screen and the profile screen. The home screen, this is ugly. I should have like format on save set up, but I usually do that on a per project basis. So maybe I can just add, okay, because the default formatter is already set up. Usually what I would do is I would set up all these settings inside of the local repository, so that way all the settings are kind of correct. But no reason to stress about that now. Now it's going to format when I save. Like if I screw up the formatting and hit save, Prettier jumps in and fixes that. So you can see we're using use navigation, grabbing navigate off of it, and when you tap the text, it's a little bit weird to put an on press handler for text. And it kind of looks like this weird linking style where it kind of hovers the text. Not very pretty, but it's just a working example so that we can link to the profile screen. And the profile screen is pretty bare. It's just a view, which is the box and the text inside of it. And the settings screen is just used over here on the other tab. Okay, so this is some of the code that I sort of copied and pasted together and got working after I installed some of these dependencies. Like I needed to install Safe Area Context, React Native Screens. Those were the things that I had to install kind of implicitly. And then from the app, you can see all of the things that we explicitly need. We need React Navigation Native, which is the sort of overall system for managing navigation on the native environment. And then bottom tabs, which gives us these bottom tabs, and the native stack, which is the pattern that we're seeing here when you tap into something. And you'll notice that the animation in the header is pretty nice. It's quote unquote perfect because it's the actual animation that's been implemented by Apple. So you can see how this home label right here animates over to the side to become the back button. And that's all implemented by the native stack from Apple, but we're accessing all of that through React Navigation. So home stack is set up right here. So I think we can also put screen options, like options. Let's just try putting options. And I can say header null. The reason I want to do that is because the home tab has its own header. So null is not a function. This is very astute. This is a very helpful error. I actually already knew that. Null is not a function. But I think it's implying that it wants a function where it's being given some argument and being told that it's null. So, okay, so now we only have one header now on our home screen tab. Tap to profile, and we have this beautiful thing. And all the layout and stuff is working correctly because of things like React Native Safe Area Context, which works with React Navigation in order to make it so that the header isn't rendered like up here in the area where it's not safe to render. So cool. We probably want some icons here for these tabs. Like let's go back to our design and see. I think they're just, okay, so there's like Explore, Trending, Search, Library, and Settings. And I don't know to what extent I'm going to flesh all of this out. For now, I will just go ahead and create those other tabs. I might not spend the time to get the icons working because I don't have all night. I'm going to have to sleep at some point. So here's the home stack, but down here is where we're setting up the tabs. So we've got home settings. So I'm going to rename home to Explore. I'm going to reuse like an empty screen, and I'm going to call it Coming Soon screen. Because basically all of these things don't exist yet. So settings, for example, will be the coming home screen. And did I rename the correct one? I think so. Let's go see. Settings, it says coming home. Coming soon. Coming home, coming soon. So in addition to Explore, we have Trending. And we know we have Settings. And then we want Search and Library. So this will feel a little bit more real world because there's 5 tabs. It'd be really nice if those tabs were, if these icons were here. But I don't know how easily I can get these exact icons. And I'm not going to like waste time on stuff that is going to need to be totally redone. You're always redoing stuff in coding, but I'm not going to stress over that. And all of these are coming soon screen, except for the home tab, which basically has a link for go to profile. So Oh, I really like this tile aesthetic, where there's like the small tiles and the big tiles that are kind of laid next to each other. And there's also this like tile inside tile. So it's like a sort of album aesthetic. Okay, and it's got the big text at the top. Maybe to warm up, we'll mess with that, but I really want to get into the meaty stuff, the meat, which is the stuff that's going here above the tab bar, and pretty soon I'm gonna get stumped. I'm gonna stump myself real quick. But before I do, let me just show you the other literal app.js file. So I'm gonna do something a little weird. I'm gonna say app nav. So now there's no app.js file. I'm gonna rename this copied one over back to app. It's a little confusing, but this has a different example with different dependencies that I've already installed into the same project. I can see Metro is getting a little bit topsy-turvy now that I've renamed things. It doesn't really like when I rename things. I'm going to restart the dev server for this. Throw some Control C in there, and that'll tell the server to stop. And Expo interface opens up. I'm going to hit run on iOS simulator. And if we like dismiss or restart, I don't know, maybe okay. The Expo client got freaked out a bit, but this is what it's supposed to look like. This is beautiful. This is a fully functional application. But let me show you what this code is that was sort of copied and pasted into here. Because I copied this straight from the React Native Gesture Handler documentation. So there's, and I haven't even read the code, so we can read this together and like understand what's happening. So on left is use shared value. It's a Boolean. So we're telling it, and by default, it is on left. And position is the actual position value, it seems, and then we're going to be doing all sorts of little math and animations with these two values. And when they say shared value, what that means is that you're sharing it between the JavaScript code and the code that's the quote-unquote native UI code that is running quickly. It's running at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, depending on your device. Or it should be at least. And we're setting up a gesture here. So on update, now because we're inside of this magical React Native gesture handler land, we're able to just directly modify these position values, but this on update callback is actually somehow happening on the main thread. So you don't have to worry too much about it, but just know that some crazy stuff is going on in order to make it so that these values, when we assign them, this callback is actually happening not on the JavaScript thread where most of our code is running. This callback is happening inside of the native thread so that this can really run efficiently. So if onLeft.value, then basically we're going to say that the position is going to match the translation. So this is interesting. So this e.translationx. Well, first of all, let me show you what the example does. As you can see, we're rendering a gesture detector, and we're rendering a view. And we're not even rendering like a screen. So like we should actually at least render a view on the outside here. I'm going to put flex 1 because that'll tell it to maximize the space of the screen. And just for the sake of understanding things, I'm going to set a background color to salmon, my favorite background color. I'm going to refresh because I kind of expected to see everything turn pink. Can't find variable view. Yeah, because I've only imported the animated view. Not a problem. We can just import it from React Native because it's just a normal view in this case. You still can't find the variable view, can you? You actually are fine. So everything is pink because I'm just kind of doing a sanity check here, making sure that this is working. And I'm curious kind of where the gesture can be detected. But before we go further, let me just explain. The animated.view has this animated style. So yes, we're saying that it's the blue square, 100 by 100. This is why you're seeing a blue square up in the corner of the application. But animated style is the special stuff, and that's why we're using animated.view here, so that we can put in the animated style. So use animated style allows us to consume the position from the shared value, the shared position value. And that's just a translate x, which is just going to push the thing from side to side. And also on the gesture detector, pan gesture, yes, so we're looking at the translation x, which is the horizontal movement of the gesture as it's happening. So this will be fun. So now we can swipe. As we're swiping, we are still in on left true. So this is still true. And then when we, there's two callbacks. There's on update, which happens during the gesture. So that's what's happening now. This is just happening during the gesture every moment because we are on left right now. Then we're just setting the position.value to translation x. So end position is going to be used when you end the gesture. So when you release, it's going to do some math to determine, are you over on the right side of the screen? And if so, now on left is true, or is false. Yeah, on left is turned to false. And as a result, the position.value here is, so what we do here is, like, you're allowed to do all this crazy stuff with the shared animated values. So with timing is an example of that, where you assign the value to this higher level thing that actually can handle time. So that's why we have this bouncing effect, right? So let me just show you, like, for example, what happens if we don't use with timing, but we have effectively the same thing. So here we're just going to set it directly to 0. And here we'll set it directly to the end position. So now everything is fine while I'm still pressing. I'm still pressing down, but when I release, it just instantly, it doesn't do the nice animation. But it is still doing this logic where you're comparing the position.value to the end position divided by 2. Because the end position is basically this distance. So it's going to see, are you left or right of this point that's halfway through the end distance? And if you're on the right, it sets it to the end position. And if you're on the left, it sets it to 0. And 0 basically means it's just not going to move this blue box from its original location. So we need to do a bunch of things to make it so that this blue box is basically the music player, because that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Is we're trying to make it so that you can swipe up and open the music player and swipe down and close it. And that's going to be one of the big accomplishments for tonight, if we get there. And just for fun, I'm going to remove the background color here just so that we can see it a little bit nicer. And let's change the layout of this thing. So currently it's got a hard-coded height, but it does not have a hard-coded width. And we need to think about how we're going to handle this with regard to layout. So the fact that it's doing a translate here rather than anything else is actually really good for performance. The fact that it's not having to recompute the layout on every step of the transition. If you do use layout properties like width, height, or flex, then you risk basically slowing down your animation because all of this layout code needs to happen on every frame. So I don't want to mess with that. Let's get rid of the width, so that way it's going to basically take the full width. But we're swiping horizontally here, so this doesn't really make any sense. What I'll do, I want to push this thing to the bottom of the screen, because this is going to be the music player, basically. The hard-coded height is kind of appropriate. It's also kind of problematic. But we'll fix that in a second. What I want to do now I will just, for the sake of testing things, I'll put it on the outside of the gesture detector, because I need to understand for myself better how this gesture detector works, because it's one of the newer things in the React Native ecosystem. So I'm just going to put a flex 1 box basically on top, and because I'm saying flex 1, it's saying to take the maximum available space, but this one has a hard-coded height, so that means it's going to take all the available space except for this height. So that's why the box is now on the bottom. And the height, I don't know, the height should really be the correct height here for the full music player. But for now, let's just make it so that way so that you can swipe this music player up rather than swiping it horizontally. It doesn't look like a music player. So one thing I'll do is I'll rename this useful value that's currently called onLeft. I'm going to rename it to isOpen. Or I'll do the opposite because just out of convenience, I'm going to say isCollapsed. Because by default it is collapsed. Use shared value is true. This is where we're setting the default for the value. And there's also the position. But the position is being used to translate horizontally. So I'll just make it so the position translates vertically. So now the gesture will be very confusing because I'm swiping left and right, but it's moving up and down. So that's ridiculous. But we can fix that pretty easily, probably by using the same tricks. Because we're using just translation X, I'm just going to change it to translation Y. And this is during the swipe where this is calculated. So now I can translate up and translate down. So I think what's happening here is the reason I'm not able to bring it up into the new location is the destination location is negative. It's basically down, and I'm not able to bring it that far down. So end position. Basically, in cases where we are using end position in a positive way, we need to use it in a negative way. End position also is tricky because end position will change really depending on the screen size. Yeah, hey Nick, I'm glad you pulled up. I know we've been chatting on Twitter a little bit. But yeah, exactly. Making the player float at the bottom, trying to make it so that you can swipe up using this normal thing, and then as a stretch goal, if I can get that working successfully, maybe we'll try to integrate it into the navigation stuff that I was talking about a little earlier. So the end position is confusing here. Is collapsed. If it's collapsed, then this is the normal value. Otherwise, let's just try doing the silly thing of basically just doing minus here and then just, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just like, I know that these relationships need to change where the end position is going in the opposite direction, basically. So I literally am just changing a plus sign to a minus sign, and I'm changing the direction of the greater than check. So let's just see what happens. Okay, well, hey, I guess that means it's working. Here, I think what's happening here is that this detection is working, and we are changing is collapsed to be false, which is good, but we're setting the end position still as a positive, and position.value, position is really vague. We probably want that to be renamed, but when this is positive, it's going to push it further down the screen. So I'm actually just going to put negative here and refresh. Okay, so now, hopefully, okay, good. It snaps. Oh, that's some sort of buggy behavior that I've just created here. But the good news is that I can come up here, and if I let go, it snaps down to this location. So this is nice. We're making progress. And so I'll bring back this with timing stuff because that was working super well. I just disabled it for fun demonstration purposes. And I'll just do it for when we're opening for now. So this is when we're detecting that your gesture has opened. Okay, so bad things happen, but here, it works in this direction. I can swipe up, if I let go, it snaps in the open position. And now I need to replicate that for closing. Okay, wow, it's hard for me to explain what's happening because I can't even see it when we start doing this. So is collapsed dot value. It defaults to true. So this part is working. It's this part that's totally whack. So again, I'm doing this thing where I don't even think about it, and this is really helpful for understanding your code. Literally, I'm just making it so that this is subtracting the end position rather than the end position subtracting the gesture value. And we'll see what happens. So we know that this part works, it opens, but now I want to be able to swipe down. Okay, good, we fixed it. That's how it often is. It's just a little bit of trial and error. I knew that that part of the code was wrong because I knew that is collapsed was false in this time. So because it's open basically. So I knew I had to change this, and I knew there couldn't be too many things that would be wrong with it. So now, even when it's open, the gesture works, and let's see, it should be, maybe it'll snap closed too. Maybe, no. So I need to do better math right here when we're comparing the position dot value. So I do want to do more trial and error. That's how I'm tempted to do it. But there's probably better ways to sort of have an understanding of what's going on with this position dot value. So I'm going to go mess around in the docs, and I'll also show you the docs that I've already been looking at, basically. Here's the installation process. I did do this step. I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about how I had installed everything. But this is basically just adding a Babel configuration that uses the Reanimated plugin, and that's what helps Reanimated accomplish all of this cool magic. So what I want to see is what sort of support they have for... Oh, here they're explaining that there are worklets happening. But I think... So, these are worklets that are happening magically. Oh, yes, it's because it's happening inside of a hook. So whenever we're doing something like use animated style or using these gesture APIs, they're all magically turned into worklets. And these worklets are the things that run really quickly at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. Layout animations, very cool, not what we're looking for. Here are some hooks. Oh boy, we're learning stuff. Use shared value. I'm curious about, use animated sensor. Oh, that's a fun one. Not relevant now, because what I'm looking for is something that helps us get understanding of what is going on. Run on JS. Well, just for the sake of it, let me just try doing the naive thing that I assume wouldn't work, but maybe it'll work. Where I'm just going to do console.log. Hello, gesture end. Because we need to make sure that we're doing the correct math here on the time the gesture ends. And we care mostly about... What do we care about? The position.value. Let's just log out the position.value. And I have a feeling this won't work because crazy JavaScript stuff is happening. But maybe, it does work. Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice when it just kind of works? So here, if I let go, here it's a negative 113. If I move up, it's also negative. So that shows that this position.value is always the super negative thing? Why is it such a bummer? Why is it such a downer? That's the big question. Because basically what we want to do is we want to make it so we can swipe it up to the top of the screen. So maybe I'll go ahead and introduce that because we need a new value that's going to notice where we are, notice the height of the screen, and depending on the height of the screen, we're going to use that instead of this hard-coded value of end position. Because we don't just want it to bounce up 200 pixels, we want it to go to the full height of the screen. So I've been in the React Native universe for a little while. So React Native Safe Area Context is sort of who we're using to understand a lot of things regarding not just the height of the screen, but the usable height of the screen. Because we don't want it to actually go up into the status bar behind the status bar. That would be ridiculous. So I'll bet you there's some interesting stuff here that it will give us. Use safe area insets or use safe area frame. This can be used as an alternative to the dimensions module. Isn't that great news? I think that's great news. Okay, I don't know what it's giving us exactly, but we can go ahead and use safe area frame, import it from safe area context, and maybe it's going to have some type safety here. A is a rect. Wow, that came out wrong. So it's basically, it looks like this, right? This is what a rect is in the world of safe area context. It has height, most importantly, for us right now. So I'll pull off this height, and let's go ahead and use this height for something. I don't know what. I would use it for this. This is where it belongs, actually, because we want to tell this view to be the same thing. Yes, at least someone was listening. Someone heard that. Someone heard me speak in a not so elegant way. I said this height is erect. So here I'll just punch this in for now. And because we have this flex 1, everything will this flex will just move out of the way. So this should basically make it so that by default it takes the full height of the screen. Height. Oh, it's actually just called height, so I can do this. And now we see maybe no safe area available. Make sure you're using safe area provider at the top of your app. Yeah, so I think maybe the navigation boilerplate actually has this solved, but it's not a very complicated thing that it's asking for. It's just asking to wrap everything with safe area provider. So I'm happy to do that and refresh. Make sure you're rendering safe area provider at the top of your app. I mean, that's just what I did. I'm going to try refreshing again because the error confuses me. Okay, so it's complaining basically because we're using safe area frame, but this component, it needs a parent component that actually has the safe area provider. So what we can do is we can have two things. We can have the app, and the app itself is going to have the safe area provider. Return the safe area provider, and it's also going to, inside of it, it'll have this thing. I'm not good at naming things. I'm just going to call it slidey. Or I'm just too lazy to name it properly, so I'm just going to name this function slidey. And now we don't need this safe area provider. Now hopefully, good, so it's entirely pink. Right, that's good and bad. It's nice. Oh look, the gesture still is happening here. But I wasn't expecting it to actually be the full height. I expected it to have the insets applied, which is fine. It's actually that I just didn't understand kind of the contract that safe area provider, or that safe area context was giving us here. So we could just try to use the component, but I just like to have the values handy and actually understand what's going on. So we just need to understand what the safe area insets are. So the insets are going to be some values, and we're going to use safe area insets. Import that from safe area context here. And I'm going to use, because this is all TypeScript, or this should be TypeScript, I looked at the name of this file here, actually. It's app.js. So it's a little bit lazy of not using TypeScript properly, but these libraries are TypeScript, so we get to benefit from all of that stuff. So if I do, I want to give it, please give me the hint. It should give me the hint. Okay, maybe now is a good time to rename this to app.tsx. TypeScript time. It is TypeScript time, baby. It's like Morbin time, but for TypeScript. I'm going to restart Expo because usually like you would have to create a tsconfig file. But I'm kind of hoping, yes, I know Expo well enough to know that they do really amazing magic stuff like this. It looks like you're trying to use TypeScript, but you don't even have all the TypeScript stuff. Do you want it? Yes, I want it. And blazing fast internet, it's downloading all these dependencies. I don't know why it's taking so long. And it says, it also says, look, we created the tsconfig for you. It's been auto-generated. Great, so now, hopefully, we can experience all the glory of TypeScript. What's the command to... Okay, good. So I was forgetting the command that prompts TypeScript to like tell me what I can put here. So I can do shift space. Shift space, now these hints are coming from TypeScript. So maybe actually I didn't need to convert it to TypeScript for that to work, but you can see that all of this code is valid TypeScript. I haven't had to change a single thing, and there's no type errors here. I think. I mean, maybe if I like restart VS Code, things are working a little bit too well. It makes me uneasy, so I'm just going to open up VS Code again, and TypeScript React. Does it have issues? No issues? Okay, yeah, I guess it's just happy with my beautiful code here. So safe area insets, shift space. I meant control command space. Maybe it's different for different people, but on my Mac, let me see if I do control command space. Yeah, that prompts the emoji picker for me. I don't know if that's the same for everybody or if I've got my configuration botched. But yeah, shift space literally is how I get to this menu where it's prompting. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but we really care mostly about the top area inset here because we want to not use the full height of the screen when we're open. So the height here is going to be the height. Okay, this is confusing. We're going to have better names here. Height is the screen height. Screen height minus the top. And the top is really the top area inset. Okay, so now, where's the simulator? Refresh, maybe? I'm hoping to see, like, the pink fill almost the whole screen. Great, this is it. This is it, where it doesn't go all the way to the top. Oh, okay. Look at that. It kind of it still uses the end position for all sorts of logic here, and we can't have that. And also, it'd be really nice if we had this timing back because that just is aesthetically pleasing when it bounces properly. But you can see it's getting super confused. I'm going to refresh. I'm just going to drag down a little bit and release, and it animates back to 0. But then I did a very similar gesture, and it animates all the way to this negative state, this very sad negative state, which is the end position. So the bug is basically all happening here at the end of my gesture. So we basically are needing to decide, is this gesture like closing the screen or not? And it's also being a little bit naive because it's just looking at the position.value. It's not looking at the velocity of your gesture. So there's all sorts of useful stuff on the event, like e.velocity_y. Ooh, so maybe depending on what your velocity is, basically how quickly you released, or how quickly your finger was moving at the time when you released, you will want to do something differently. So like even if it's most of the way closed, if you're doing a swipe up, that means, hey, you're swiping up. You want it to be open, even if it's less than 50% of the way opened. So what I'll do is I'll have some like presentation basically in the log statement, so that way I can see what values are available. And then we can write some better logic, some better math. So velocity, and position. And why is it complaining? Oh, because there's no comma here. Okay, so now we'll see some logic. And hey, just because this is crazy looking and it's really hard to see what's going on, I'm going to comment out this. I'm going to comment out this, so that we basically are just always going to snap back to 0 no matter what we do. And I'm going to refresh because I don't know if that's what happened, or if that's what, like, if it affected the current state when I saved that code. I want to like see what it's like for real. So now I can swipe down, it snaps back. I can swipe up, it snaps back. No bugs here. It's really easy, and because we never set is collapsed to false, then we are always in this state where it's just really simple, and during the drag, we directly apply the value to the position. So that's what's going on here, by the way, is it's basically, it knows that you've translated from the end position because the is collapse had changed. So yeah, we're making progress. It's just a little confusing. So I did a few swipes like up and down, and we're going to see if the logs have useful stuff. So the velocity is 0. That's not ideal. I'm not sure if that's just because I tried to do it a little bit more violently that time. Oh look, I got a velocity. A highly negative velocity. Like that's an extreme velocity. Really what I should be doing is I should be trying this on a actual phone, and then my fingers will probably be outputting very different velocities compared to what I can do with the trackpad. Because with the trackpad I'm like clicking down and pressing, whereas on the phone it's literally with a press. So I think it's easier to just have a real velocity in this case. But hey, I'm just crazy like that. That's just I guess that's just the nature. I think, I'm not sure. But you can also see that the position is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. So here's the thing though, is we've got a bug like right away when we load the application. It's embarrassing. Is collapsed is true, and yet it's all the way up here. So the way we can fix that is by changing the transform here, changing the logic that's going on here. So the position. What does the position mean, really? Like when the position is 0, which is the default value, then does that mean it's 0 from the top or 0 from the bottom? So for example, if we just leave it where position directly means translate y, then we can make it so that the default value is the height. Well, it's basically, we want the default value to be the same as this, which is the screen height minus the top area inset. Refresh. Okay, maybe it's a little too far because now we can't see it at all. and I can't even swipe on it. And I think the reason I can't swipe on it is because the gesture detector does not cover the full screen. So I'll just literally do this. Oops, what'd I do? I had my finger on the wrong hotkey. I just do Option up to move this one line up, and I hit save. So basically now the it's unhappy about the way that I'm doing this. The gesture detector only wants there to be one child. One child. So Nick is saying you want the height to be into consideration for the bottom position. Absolutely. And I'm like mixing and matching all these things at once that I'm working on where, so like for example, if we do put the gesture detector on the outside, it'll work fine because there's just one child view. And what that will mean is that means we can swipe in the white area. Oh boy. Oh boy. So when I start off, the position is all the way, it puts it entirely off screen. But then as soon as I start touching, it jumps up to this location. And that makes perfect sense. I really love this new API that React Native Gesture Handler is giving us because it's so much easier to understand what's going on in its own head. Because we're basically setting it to be the translation Y. And at the beginning of the gesture, the translation Y is not really, it's basically 0. It's very low. So we need to just think more carefully. I need to think a little bit more carefully about what value means what. So yes, this use shared value, or this default value, is better because it kind of puts it off screen, or at the bottom, but it's not right. So I'll tell you what, we can do it the other way. So position.value, let's make it so that position means how far you have swiped. It basically means, it's literally talking about the current location of this thing. Right now, 0 means it's here. So let's make it so that 0 position puts this thing all the way in the bottom state where there's only 100 pixels of height. So we were laughing at this like end position variable because it makes no sense in our new app. I like it, but we can have a hard-coded variable for the height, player height, and we'll just say it's 100 pixels. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to compare the position.value with the player height. So, or we're going to basically keep in mind the player height when we're doing the top offset. Okay, it's really my brain is starting to feel like it's actually almost 2 a.m., which is fine because I decided, I'll just stream until I get tired. And now my brain is firing off tired signals. Not my body, but like my brain is just not working very well. So what we'll try to do is we'll just say that like what happens when we do it this way, where the translate Y is going to be always 100 pixels. Well, that's not right because we need it to be, the translate Y would be the height because we're trying to push it all the way down to the bottom by default when we're collapsed. So the screen height, Okay, well, this is the screen height, but we want it to be less than the screen height because we're translating Y pushes it down. So we're going to subtract the player height from that. And now hopefully we'll see the player just for 100 pixels at the bottom of the screen. We kind of have the trouble now where the player by default is inside of the safe area. So this is not 100 pixels, I can tell. I'm a little annoyed. I'm a little chuffed that this does not look like 100 pixels. But even if it did look like 100 pixels, we need to keep in mind the safe area view at the bottom. But I'm actually going to skip that step because eventually this player is going to be above the tab bar. we got a first time chatter. We're gonna lose too. You say my English is good for the 2 a.m. zone. My secret agent. My English is pretty good. It's my first language. I'm from California, so that might affect some things. I don't know how my English would degrade. Like I would have to be tired and drunk for my English to fall apart. But thanks for chatting. Thanks for complimenting my English. It's basically the only language I know. So it's not too hard for me, not yet. Just not fucked up enough for that. So the height here, oh boy, now my brain needs to get back into it because we're modifying multiple things. There's the primitive value of the height. Yeah. What am I doing in Europe then? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just traveling, like trying the whole digital nomad thing. I'm thinking maybe I can work on my company while I travel, and I really haven't gotten much work done on my main gig Zerv, but tonight I'm doing just a little exploration on the side to help basically like get me back into the flow of things with React Native on a totally fresh project, because there's all these incredible new tools for gestures and animations that I don't have much practice with yet, even though I know about them. So I've been playing with Gesture Handler and Reanimated. Reanimated is just kind of easy, but once you start working with gestures, it gets crazy complicated. As you can see, I'm having to do all sorts of light math, as you can describe it here, like the logic for what to do when you let go of your finger, and theoretically the velocity should be a useful value. Here, when we're letting go of our gesture, we can interpret the velocity of what's going on. Yeah, the animation tools are they're exciting, they're cool, but yeah, don't expect William Kendallian levels of content from me on the animation front, because I'm still learning it. I'm not really teaching it, or I mean, you're watching me learn it. You're hopefully learning as well, and yeah, I definitely encourage you to tinker around with it, because it's very fun to be like, oh, let me just change this value around. The bug must be right around here, and you just swap something without understanding it, and then it sometimes works, and sometimes forces you to learn some stuff. So here, just for the sake of like sanity, I'm just going to hard code the value at the translate at 0. So this is what it looks like without any sort of translation done. So I need to just really understand for myself like what the position means, or we can basically decide what the position means right now, because when I think of position 0, I think of it being fully collapsed. So I'm going to try to make it so that position 0 results in a fully collapsed state. So the way we can do that is basically make it so that when position is 0, when the position value, which is the shared value, when it's 0, the translate y will be a high positive number that pushes it almost down to the bottom of the screen. And that's what we had right here, right? With screen height minus the player height. But then it pushed it a little bit too far. So I think we need to also subtract the top area inset, because that's also basically affecting the thing. Okay, that looks more like 100 pixels. I'm not measuring. We don't need to measure it right now. This looks a little bit better. And let's see, is the gesture happening right now? One thing we can do to check is when I let go of a gesture, we should see a new event here. Okay, so the gesture is happening. I think we've just commented out a few too many things. So if isCollapse.value, then the position.value is going to be the translation y. And yeah, it's because we've totally not used the shared value, because we need to use position somehow here in our transform. And because we're using reanimated like a shared value, that's why it's like this lookup where it's doing the dot value. Oh, you can't see that. It's doing this lookup of the top value. So, okay, so now we're factoring in the value. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be a plus or a minus. I'm going to drag up, and it goes in the wrong direction. Okay, so I'm going to add the position. Okay, this makes sense. We're making progress here. So I can swipe it up, it snaps back down. I can swipe it down, it still always snaps back to 0. And that's because we've commented out a lot of the really good stuff on the gesture. So we're never getting to the state where is collapsed is false. So now we can do a little bit of logic to decide how we want to do that. I'm going to totally pretend like the velocity is not a thing. We're going to forget about that entirely, especially because it's so hard to test on the simulator. Like, we only saw one velocity value and it looked really extreme, let's just say. Like, I think that when you're using an actual finger on an actual phone, it's going to look different. So let's just pay attention to the position dot value, and we'll look to see if the position dot value is far enough. Now, what does it mean to be far enough? Like, that's kind of a matter of opinion, because maybe you want it to open after you just swipe it up this much, because, like, hey, you're kind of expressing the intent to open it. Or maybe it needs to be open once you've dragged it this far, or more than halfway. I think that's pretty normal default, is the halfway. That's obviously what they were demonstrating before when they were comparing the position to the end position divided by 2. So the end position is basically going to be some math here where we're taking the screen height minus the top area inset. And I think that is the end position, probably. So here, because these values are not shared values, we can actually just go ahead and create. Yeah, interesting that it's 30%. I know on a lot of iOS apps, you said that it's 30% on Android. Because on a lot of iOS apps, it does take the velocity into account. And I think it's either like distance or velocity. But a lot of these things feel good or feel fine, and like people don't actually notice or care a huge amount. But here we've created this new variable for end position. Oh wait, what if we just call this player height? Oh wait, but then we also have, so let's call this the open player height. And then we can rename this other player height to be the collapsed player height. Okay, so now we've got hopefully some more clear variables. So here, we can log the position.value, and we can also log the open player height. So in our terminal, I'm so delighted by the way that log statements are working. I know that's kind of like, why would log statements not be working? But at one point in the process of Reanimated 2 being developed, or sort of getting more mature, that didn't actually work properly because some of the log statements were happening in the worklet. So they weren't properly coming through. So this is really nice just to see this stuff. So here I'm going to let go like this, and it says, okay, the position is negative good number of pixels, and the open player height, that looks pretty accurate. That's like 800 pixels. Okay, now I'll let go again. The position is negative a bit. Like that looked like I was about 100 pixels. Yeah. So one thing that you'll notice, that I just noticed at least, is the position is negative, but I was expecting the position to be positive. And better variable names would help, right? So this is part of the process of kind of going from the example code, where it just had really simple, confusing variable names. Now we can have a better variable name here, which is drag up pixel positions, or like player vertical position. Player vertical position. Okay, so now we need to go rename these references to position. Okay. I could have used VS Code to properly rename that variable for me rather than suffering through. Now the thing is it's not actually doing the right thing because it should player vertical position, like in my mind, it's a positive value when you're dragging it up. And you shouldn't even be able to drag it down. So we can fix all of that stuff. So the first thing is we're going to make it so that it's negative value when we're setting it. And of course, that means we need to fix it over here. So we're going to subtract the value from there. So that makes perfect sense because it's the translate y, which is how far it's being pushed down. And we want to push it less down when you're swiping up and this player vertical position is going up. So we should have basically the same behavior here. Yeah, we do. Now swiping it down doesn't make any sense. So maybe we can just fix that right now. Yeah, Nick, yeah, you also have the understanding of like all this magic that's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, like usually the magic just does not work, but they've been putting such good effort into it. Like the Software Mansion people who work on Reanimated, they are so brilliant to make this stuff work in the first place, and then also have such a nice API. Because I don't know if you've worked with the other animation libraries in basically any platform, but also in the previous React Native animation libraries, it was kind of a struggle. Doing everything by hand, I like to suffer, just like you. Yeah, well, we're gonna lose. Yeah, I don't know. This is not even as bad as it could be. This could be so much worse. And yeah, how else would you do it if not by hand when it comes to doing something like that that's a custom UI like this? So that was one of the reasons why I accepted working on this project. I'm not getting paid or anything, actually. I'm just doing it so that I can make content, learn some stuff, and contribute to some people who would probably benefit a lot just by having some of this code. We're making good progress though. We just need to, it's the on update basically when every tick, every frame or whatever, we don't want to let this happen. So basically we'll check if you're trying to translate in the wrong direction. Oh, but we need to make sure that you are collapsed because you do need to be able to swipe down if the player is open. Of course, that's how you're going to be able to close it. So here inside of this branch, let's say if e.translation y is vertical has some relationship to 0. This is kind of what I mean about like a lot of trial and error when it comes to animation stuff. Like I did not even think about this. I just wrote down one of the plus or minus or greater than or less than, and I screwed it up. But you can see I can only now drag in this direction. I cannot drag it up. So swap the direction of that, and now I can't drag it down, but I can drag it up. But no matter how far I drag it, it always snaps down to 0. And that makes sense because we're not actually using this logic here that we are priming ourselves for and we are learning about with the animation. You like the tiny animation that happens when you drag it down while it's already down. Well, like these player APIs exist in a bunch of different apps, right? If any of the apps do it, then maybe I'll do it. I opened YouTube, but I meant to open YouTube Music. I'll show you on my tiny iPhone. My wonderful small iPhone. Like you can't gesture down. They never do. It never works this way. Like wait, what? Oh my god! I just proved myself wrong. Why is it letting me take it down? What? Oh, I see. Because I was a dismiss. Okay, so well, the user knows it's draggable, and like. The user doesn't actually need to know it's draggable because they can tap on it. But that was hilarious, where I was just about to like show, look, it never does this, but it does. So like here the player is open, I swipe down the player with this wonderful little animation like this. And yes, because YouTube Music actually lets you dismiss it by swiping down, they do let you do that. But I haven't seen that anywhere else, like in Apple Music or in Spotify. That's so funny that I just like, look, it doesn't drag down, and then it drags down. Yeah. Oh, and I guess Spotify doesn't even have... Oh man, Spotify has such a bad animation compared to YouTube Music. Spotify just replaces the entire view. Like they just cover up the mini player. Whereas YouTube Music actually animates between them. But you're right, that's a whole thing in user interface design, is keeping in mind like what you're communicating to the user by the way that things move. I've heard that referred to as like affordances. So it's like, your user interface will have certain affordances that kind of imply to the user what they're allowed to do from there. We're going to do it the same way other people do, otherwise it'll be confusing. True, but also like I think people are more comfortable with apps, like especially touching apps, because how else would you interact with an app? But like there's several ways to open the player, because you can tap on it or you can drag it up. The fact that it's a gesture is actually kind of a nice to have. For dismissing, it's more critical, I would say, but dragging it up is a little bit, it's just a cute thing. It just makes your app feel good. And I think that's really important, is making it so that like your users like feel good, like it feels cozy and it feels warm and it feels safe to move around inside of the app. And if something moves in a certain direction, you should be able to literally like physically basically move it back or move it in the direction that it's allowed to go in. So like I do think that of course we want to sort of adhere to certain standards, and clearly it's been designed this way, right? This music API, or this music GUI, was kind of modeled after YouTube Music, is what Romy said. And I mean, YouTube Music has the nicest animation, I think, that I've seen. Maybe we should just go take a look at Apple Music, because I'm bashing them. And remember when it used to be called iTunes? Now it's just called Music on the iPhone. Okay, wow, it's interesting that it lets me open the player without even having anything playing. It says like now playing, but literally nothing is playing. It's kind of ridiculous. It had... Oh, that was a bad interaction. Okay, you probably didn't see that. Let me show you again. Okay, we'll go to the camera view. Oops. Okay. So swipe down works fine. Swipe down looks pretty good. It kind of just magically transforms into this thing. But the swipe up it doesn't gesture properly. So it should allow me to control the distance that I've swiped it up. But look, if I start swiping, this is really physically challenging. It's just, oh, come on. It just like takes that as a hint. So it's not a proper affordance where I can give up and change my mind. Once I start swiping up, Apple Music is like, yes, you've opened it. Which is not the best interaction. I should put left and right swipe into your app as well. Yes, exactly, for switching to the next song, previous song. But yeah, no, you should have like some affordance, like where, you can, if the user starts swiping up and they change their mind halfway through that swipe and their finger is still down on the phone, you should be able to swipe it back down. And that is definitely possible. It's, React Native Gesture Handler is one of the only ways that's kind of easy to do. Because we're using all of these incredible technologies that lets us just boop. Like if we want to do these things, like, it takes just with timing. With one line of code, you can kind of make it so that it animates back down to the default player. And because basically it's all of this exact logic here where it's checking the end position. So maybe we should try bringing that back. For now, hey, let me just try doing the wrong thing. I'm going to delete some of this stuff. I'm going to comment out this guy. This is the case when you're closing the animation. But let's say, what does the opening look like? Basically, we're going to say that we want to animate the player vertical position to what? The player height, right? Oh, to the open player height. Wait, no. Does the open player height includes the 100 pixels? And when the position is 0, it's already visible for 100 pixels. So this gets a little bit confusing. But we can go ahead and create a new variable. It's not the most efficient thing, but it's not, one variable is not actually going to be a waste here, because this overall component does not get re-rendered very frequently. So we can put some extra variables here that we won't need half of the time. So open player position is the open player height minus the collapsed player height. Because at position 0, you're at the collapsed player height. So open player position is where we're going to always animate to, no matter what they do with the gesture. Okay, so we reload the app and it looks like this, and we can swipe up and swipe down, and no matter where we swipe, it should, yes, it animates to the open position. And now everything is broken because we haven't really dealt with these situations properly. Specifically, we need to come back into here. So basically at this time, we would also be setting, at the time when we're doing animate to open player position, we would also set is collapsed to false. From your personal experience, you'd make the app the way that you'd use it, and then once it goes out to the public, you'd modify it, and then it would work the way that most people want it to work. Sorry, my brain is dead. I can't even read written English right now. Yeah, exactly. I think it's all about iteration and going with your instinct, going with what makes you feel good when you use your own app. So is collapse is true. So basically we want to have an if statement around here. So we do have this if statement. We just need to use the new variable names. So basically we're going to check to say if there's an intent to open the player, you want to do this. Otherwise, you want to do this. And this is junk. Okay, so now this is our new code. We just need to fill in the blanks. This blank, where we're kind of guessing the intent. So yeah, understanding what your users are going to want is a very tricky thing sometimes, though, Nick. Yeah, especially when it comes to these things where the user doesn't even know most of the time. Like, we know because we're constantly staring at our phones and thinking about it and like experimenting with it. Like, I'll see, people who work on Expo or people who've worked on navigation. Like, when I was working on navigation stuff, like, I would stare at this stuff. Like, I would like see this, like, I would just stare at like the animations that Apple has done for like hours. Like, watch how the settings back button transforms perfectly into the settings title. Things like that, I would just like look at this for like an hour and be like, how did they do it? And like all of that. Yeah, you're mixing British and American English. Yeah, well, that's a whole style too. But yeah, no worries. I think we're all a little tired. All of us people in Europe it's a little late for us. Okay, so let me show you the code again. So basically what we're saying here is we're always interpreting this as the intent to open. And then basically once is collapsed, we need to be handling the drag differently once the is collapsed is false. So like once the player is open, we need to handle it differently when they come back for a second swipe, because just like the values are all rejiggered. So let's get this logic to work, right? So we have the open player height and we have the position, and we're logging those values out, right? So the open player height and the position. So we basically want to see if your position is close enough to the open player height. I think we're going to lose said it's 30% on Android, but I'll just do the 50% sort of naive thing. Or maybe I'll just do like 20%, because really swiping it up at all is enough of an intent, I think. That you're swiping it up. You can't expect the user to swipe their finger all the way across their phone. That would be ridiculous. We need to save effort, save our users calories or whatever. We can't have our users get too tired swiping. So we could just literally check some absolute value, like if the position, the vertical player position, is over like 100. But I think because we have the open player height, we'll check to see if the vertical player position is more than 30%. Let's do the Android thing. Why is it giving me a squiggly? Oh, I see. Because one of these is a shared value, so I need to look at the value. Oh, it's so nice that error was like really helpful. I'm not going to show it again on purpose, but that was a very nice error that came up. Okay, so it starts off at the bottom, and now I can swipe it up a little bit and let go. It bounces back. I can swipe it up a lot, and it bounces open. And now it's going to be busted. Because, now if I swipe, it actually doesn't do anything. And the reason why is because on the onUpdate callback, we've commented out this code. So now I need to think about this again. Do some actual thinking. So first of all, we're going to want the relationship between the player vertical position and the current touch to be the same. So it'll be negative here. And let's just like see what happens if we do the exact same thing here. Because I think it's basically going to cause a really unpleasant jump, because what's happening here is the translation Y is referring to the amount of movement that the user is doing at the start of the touch. So we can't just take that and put that on the vertical position, because we're really going to be comparing it to the open player position. Okay, so let's just quickly see what this looks like. Okay, yeah, it jumps down all the way to 0, because it's, the gesture hasn't moved much, and then we're jumping it all the way down to this 0 value, or this low value down here. So I don't know if it's a plus or a minus here. I'm just going to do a plus the open player position. I can think about it too, but it's just easier to try it sometimes than it is to think about. Okay, swipe it up, let go. Now swipe it down. Okay, so now, oh, check it out. It works in both. Oh, I was about to like be really self-congratulatory, and then yeah, we saw some terrible bug, but like it was working here. Swipe it up. Oh wait, I think I know why. Because we need to set the is collapsed value. I know I'm all over the place. Like, it's just that we forgot to, when we're closing, we need to set is collapsed to true. I like how well this code reads. It's such a legible piece of code for implementing a gesture. It's just so delightful. Okay, so now it swipes up, and hopefully it swipes down. Okay, it swipes down if I'm like persistent with it. I need to swipe it down all the way to like 30%. So, um, maybe that's why they were doing 50% before. Because 50% is identical in both directions. It's like at the midway point. But we can still do this. It's not hard. We just need to like have extra logic. Because we need to check is collapsed dot value, because that basically means whether or not we're coming from the top or coming from the bottom. So, okay, this might seem a little crazy. Oh, here, let's just do it this way. Inside of our if statement, we can put a ternary. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit harder to read now, but I've basically made it so that the exact same logic is happening either way right now. So we still need to change either this or we need to change this, so that way it has the correct behavior. I think, so if is collapsed is true, then that means we're starting from the bottom. And we already have the correct behavior if we're starting from the bottom. So now we need to consider if we're starting from the top. And I think the easiest way to do this, that will be like pretty code, will be to basically move this multiplication over here. So now when you're closing, you only need to bring it down a third. Let me test this before I act super confident. Okay, so I'm going to open it. I'm going to open it for less than a third. It snaps back down. Open it for more than a third. It snaps up. So now we're in the open position. So because is collapsed is false, we should be receiving this logic now. So now we're comparing things differently. Okay, a little bit. Okay, that was not good. So, okay, now let me show you the most extreme version of the bug, because now I can drag it all the way down here. Oh wait, no, what's going on? I'm not, yeah, my logic is like super whack. You're multiplying the vertical position value and you're comparing it to the open player height. I thought this was just really elegant when I like moved this times 0.3 over to the other side of the statement. But like now I'm super confused about what it's even doing. So instead, I'll do it differently. I've made it opposite. Yeah. Here's just the simple way of doing what I was like thinking. I don't like it this way because it's just like 0.3, 0.7. It's a bunch of hard-coded values. If I wanted to do that differently, I could do 1 minus 0.3. And then maybe we can have that as a extra variable like const gesture trigger distance. Trigger ratio. Yeah, no, it's distance. Distance ratio. We can have long variable names. It's really helpful for our own brain to have really explicit variable names. There's no shame in like having really long variable names. I know it's a little more to read, but it's fine. Oh, threshold. Gesture threshold ratio. Okay, I like that. So now, maybe it'll work. Okay, if I swipe it down a little bit, it doesn't respect it, but if I swipe it down a third, it works. Now if I swipe it up a third, it works. Okay, so we should eventually get some velocity working, but hey, I mean, this is looking not so bad. What's not good though is there's no content inside of here, and the content itself needs to be animating as well. That's not impossible. It's not hard to do actually, because we have the player vertical position, and we can just do additional math for additional styles on top of that. So how about we do one of them, because it'll take forever to like animate like all of the different controls that are inside of this thing. And you know, I'm gonna go to sleep before too long, and you know, I don't have all day. The height needs to reset at the top. I'm not sure what you mean by that. if you're referring to like the fact that there's still white space up here, like that was very deliberate because we don't want the player to sort of go into the status bar area. That was kind of like part of my understanding of the design. But hey, what we can do is we can add border radius. I think that'll be a nice like aesthetic if we have like a big chunky border radius. Yeah, that's kind of nice. It looks pretty good at the top, but it does not look very good at the bottom. Maybe we'll just lower it down like a border radius of 8. No worries, Nick. Okay, this is fun. That's opening and closing. But what's not fun is that basically everything inside of here is going to get pushed down, right? So let me illustrate that point with a big old glaring bug that we're going to have to go fix for ourselves. Oh, move the player to the top or the bottom. Yeah, because like what I'm picturing here is that it's got like the sort of, or here, let me go to the design. So like when it's collapsed, you can see that the album art is in the lower left corner. And this is what I want to screw around with, is the layout for the album art. And then when the player is open, of course the album art is like front and center, big old album art. So the Gary Vee audio experience, oh god. I'm going to pretend I didn't see that. Okay, so I'm going to plop in a new animated view. And this would probably be like an image, like an animated.image. But that's fine that it's just going to be a view for now, because the tricky thing that we're working on here is the animations and the gesture. We'll worry about the image a little bit later, because it should be a matter of just replacing this with literally animated.image, or you can put an image inside of the view, and because we're using transforms on the view, it'll affect the image inside as well, of course. So background color, what's their album art going to be colored? Blue? Blue is one of my favorite colors, along with every other color, because I don't really have a favorite color, because that's ridiculous. So what would the height be? So one thing that React Native has actually is called the aspect ratio. I sure hope this stuff works well, because I've heard of there might be bugs with the aspect ratio. But let's just see where, okay, well, this is a square piece of album art. And what we're mostly doing here is we're kind of laying it out for the case when it's open, because that kind of relies more on screen size and things like that, and I don't want to have to do a bunch of math to figure it out. We are going to have to do the math on one of the open state or the closed state, and I guess I've just decided that it'll be a little bit easier to do the math on the closed state. Also, for the sake of fleshing this out a little bit, let's go ahead and put in some text. I'll put it as an animated.txt, even though we might not do much animation on it. It's going to have some style, and then we can put in the text. So now we're going to have the name of the song name. So here we can just yoink Havana. And because I want that to show up above the album art. So it says now playing from podcast/album name. So I'll just rename this to podcast/album name. So we want it to resemble the design a little bit. So we'll say text align is center. That should put the text in the middle. And then we need it to be like a bigger, maybe 28 pixels. I don't know. That looks like a size. And we're definitely going to want some margin. I'll just be a little bit more explicit. Like the margin vertical is the important stuff here. The margin horizontal is good because if you have a long title, you don't want it to butt up right against the edges. But margin vertical will probably be kind of distinct. And also, let's just see where the design looks. So yeah, the closing button here is going to be left, kind of floating left of this stuff. Margin vertical, I'll just say like 16 for now. None of this stuff is really faithful to the design. Padding versus margin. Yeah, I don't have too much of a preference on which one I use. It would work either one in this case because it's like a text element here. If we cared about seeing the border of this element, then it would be really relevant whether or not we're using padding versus margin. And I'll give you an example. This big blue box, right? We can't be using padding because we want to be using the margin. So yeah, like here we can just go ahead and change this to padding vertical on the text. I don't really care. It should result in the same thing, but we will set a margin of like 16 on the blue box. What is going on? Is it just me or does this blue box look a little bit off center? Nick likes setting the padding on the parents and the margin on the children. Yeah, I usually tend to use margin by default, and then occasionally, like if I need padding, it would make sense. But that's also what you say, Nick, is also really like kind of intuitive or obvious because like the padding is always, or the padding is on the child. It's like, and yeah, and the parent affects the layout of the children by setting its padding, and the margin affects its own layout by setting the margin. Wow, I'm really struggling to put sentences together, aren't I? But why in the hell is this, like, why is this size padding way bigger than 16 pixels? Maybe this is 16 pixels over here, but isn't that a little bit strange? And I'm trying to even figure out how do I troubleshoot that. I'm just going to remove the padding on the text because I hope the text isn't affecting the blue stuff. Why is the text, or why is the blue thing not centered? I'm going crazy. So, okay, changing the text around didn't help at all. It's possible that aspect ratio is just not actually having a good time. So this view is flex direction where it's like it's laying everything out vertically. So one thing we could do is we could say like align self, I think, to stretch. But that's the default, I think. So of course that's not going to make a difference. I'll put a border radius on it because that'll just make me feel a little bit better. I don't know what's going on. Why is the blue box not going in the right place? If I remove if I remove the aspect ratio, the whole thing disappears. I was like, what's going on? Let me just put flex 1 so that it's like telling this thing to take up the right amount of space. Okay, I think flex 1 was the issue because it wasn't necessarily taking up as much space as it could. And then the aspect ratio was, I don't really know why it was the size it was, but maybe this will work now once we add the aspect ratio back. Oh no. Oh no. So this kind of lets you know how the aspect ratio interacts with the flexbox. And it's not impressing me. I'm not being very happy with it. So one thing we can try doing is putting another view. And I'll use another animated view because maybe we'll want to animate it, maybe we won't. I don't know. And we'll change the direction, like flex 1 so that this guy takes up space. Well, no, we don't want it to take up space. We want it to just be as small as the blue box is. You know, after all this, it would have been easier actually to just hard code the exact location and size of this box. So I really made the wrong choice on which direction I was going to animate this from, I guess. What's a different background color? Like pink? Okay. So, and then we change the flex direction to column, because column is the opposite of row, naturally. And row is the default for React Native Flexbox. It's a little bit disappointing that this blue box is not showing up. Align self stretch. First time viewer, Macromian and Randy Savage. Oh yeah, thanks. I've been testing out some console.logs up here. It was very helpful actually. We can even delete the console.log because it was so effective. It got us to fix all of this code, and we've moved on from it. So I'm taking the opposite advice from the first time chatter here. But hey, look at this. It goes up and down. Wasn't doing that at the start of the stream, was it? Oh, it's nice to see that. But what's not nice is that this blue box is not showing up. So let me just try stretching out the pink thing. All right, well, it's not good either because, oh, well, here's what we can do is we can set on the pink guy, even though it's flex 1, which is like take the maximum height, let's just change this to be an actual hard-coded height. Because something needs to determine what is the height of the, well, no, it should be the width of the screen that defines the height of the square. But hey, whatever. We're just going to say what it looks like. So yeah, the important thing is that it's like actually a square album art, because that's the actual thing. So what we can do is we can do align content center. It's either align content, no, it's justify content. It depends on the flex direction. And oh boy. Now I'm doing bad things. How did this even happen? Why is the blue box just deciding to like totally disrespect the authority of the pink container? I'm really just burying myself into a hole because I just wanted to make sure that the overflow hidden would hide that. But what is going on with this layout code? Oh man. Plus, we're having the same issue that we were having before, where it's not actually centered. It's off by like 14 pixels or something. It's not centered, but there's nothing that should be pushing it around. Yeah, no. In this household, we have our own rules of physics that are beautifully defined in this reanimated code. And all this code would terrify me if I were seeing it for the first time, but we just wrote all of this basically, so it looks perfectly sensible to me. Or we rewrote it from the example. But now I'm just struggling with simple stuff. Simple stuff. Okay, so hard-coding the height here is probably not advisable. Align self, stretch, justify content center. Okay, what happens if we take out the justify content center? Yeah, like the latest React Native technologies are very impressive, Nick. I'm giddy at how you can create like a fully custom gesture with just like 15, 30 lines of code, 50. Who's counting? Oh, I see. So there's the margin here. We're going to take out the margin and at least... This is so strange that this, like, margin and aspect ratio are working so poorly together. But it's so nice to be able to like have this environment where it's like it's just kind of React Native and the React Native tools, like, and Expo, really. Expo is powering a lot of this stuff. This is literally the native Expo app, this Expo Go app in my simulator. But something is weird with this aspect ratio and margin, because the height is being entirely inferred. So it should just take up more height that would be necessary. Can I put padding on the parent element? We can try that. We can just do that as like the opposite of kind of what we were doing before. Well, hey, I'm not going to say that's like makes entire sense to me, because like the align self stretch means that it should be taking as much width as possible, and then there was a margin of 16, and there's also the aspect ratio. So this does fix it, and I thank you for that. We're going to lose, but I can't possibly understand why it wasn't working before. But we're not here to puzzle over these things. I'm just going to delete the background color here. I'm going to bump up the padding to be way bigger, like 60 or maybe 40. What does 40 look like? Okay, so now this is starting to look a little bit more like an actual layout for a player. And what I'll do is maybe I'll add a little bit of padding on this guy so that this text gets pushed down a little bit. 24. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Yeah, 24 looks great. And then podcast / album name is like, I think it's supposed to be like red text. It's like this hot pink. Well, I'm either going to just use red or nothing. So I'll make it red. Actually, although I do have a color picker. I forgot that I had this color picker handy, otherwise there would be no way. Is it a color picker? Can I pick a color? Alright, I don't even know how to use my color picker. You do things that feel right. Oh, here, look. The color picker shows up. Now I can get the hex code. Copy. Wow, Che Guevara red. There's like a name. This color picker is so cute. It even has a name for everything. A name for like every different color. Okay, so no, it's not going to be red. It's going to be our perfect, beautiful red. And now we need to make it so that our background color is no longer salmon. It'll be white. But now we don't get to see our border. So maybe we can add a shadow. So we need to like do a shadow color of like hex of 0, but you don't want it to be full opacity, so you can do like 8 or something, and then like shadow offset, or no, shadow radius will be like, I don't know, 5 or 4, 6. Shadow opacity, usually, no, the color already is half opacity, so I think maybe this will be good, or it should be good, but now we're not seeing the shadow at all, so it really makes me wonder about everything. Because there's the offset. We don't need an offset because we have the shadow radius. Okay, let's just set a shadow opacity of 0.9. Okay, yay, we see a shadow here. We can actually see the shape of our player. And we are a little aggressive on the opacity, I think. Or we could also change the color itself. But make it, and the radius should be, what did I say before? 6. Yeah, no. 3. Okay, now it needs to have less opacity. It doesn't need to be much of a shadow for it to feel right. Okay, so our next challenge is going to be, like, how do we make it so that this blue square animates off to the side at closing time? And we also need to animate this text, but we'll worry about that later. Another thing we can do is we can actually just have 2 different sets of text. As long as you have some shared element transition, like like the album art, as long as your eyes have some consistency as the animation is happening, a bunch of the other stuff can just kind of fade out and fade back in. Yeah, you're asking about the shadow color. And React Native supports two different types of colors, basically. There's normal hex, which is 3 characters, right? So the full hex code here is going to be like 000000, and then 88. And this last part is the opacity. So that's kind of a normal feature that hex colors have, is that you can actually provide them in 4 parts, and the last part is how opaque it is, right? So if I change this to FF, it'll be like a red shadow. Here it's a pink shadow. And if I change this 88 to another FF, it'll make it darker because it's basically more opacity on the color itself. But it's a bit confusing because there's also the shadow opacity here, which I didn't think was necessary, but the shadow wasn't even appearing until I set the shadow opacity. So that specifically is a React Nativeism. I don't like it when there's weird shit that goes on with React Native, that CSS just has a different API basically for specifying colors or for specifying shadows, because CSS has this kind of string based API, and React Native has as many sort of normalized values as possible. Whereas in CSS, you just kind of provide the shadow as a string. But this is way nicer, I think. It's more explicit this way, and also we get, we should get type annotations. Here it's maybe, yeah, so here are all the different styles that you can kind of insert here, because there's type safety, including the shadow stuff. So it's kind of more intuitive, I think, compared to CSS. So let's see if we can get this blue box to go jump over to the right. But that'll be a little bit tricky because we don't understand its current size. So yeah. Well, one thing we can do is we can make it so that this red text just fades out when we get to the bottom of the screen. That should be pretty straightforward. It's already an animated.txt, so we can have opacity. So let's create a new shared value called open progress or collapse progress. I don't know. Can't decide if it should be open progress or collapse progress, but we already have is collapsed. So here's time for a new thing where we're basically needing a value that's based on the player vertical position. So we have all this logic regarding the vertical position of the player, but we want to have a value that's literally derived from the player's vertical position. And it's going to be called collapsed progress. So const collapsed progress, this will be an animated style. Oh, and here actually it can't just be literally inside here. I'm pretty sure we need to do, so we can turn our styles into an array, and we can have a new item in our array, which is text style or album title style. So that will be a new thing that we create. And this part we know is just to use animated style. And we'll set the opacity. So there's a few things that are easy to animate or very highly performant to animate, and they're opacity and translations or transforms. Everything else might be a little bit slower to animate, so you definitely want to try to use the transforms or the opacity. And this is true actually on web just as well as React Native, even though there's not really any limit in either environment anymore on which animations you can do. It's just always best to only animate transforms and opacity if you can help it. So collapse progress is something that we need to create, but it's going to be an interpolated style. Now we just need to find the documentation for, we are on the reanimated documentation. So use derived value. Okay, this is what it's called. and you pass in an array of dependencies. I see. So, and you're going to basically say which values you're going to depend on. So we need to go call useDerivedValue. We can auto import that. So all I had to do there was I hit Shift space and then hit Enter because that auto imported useDerivedValue from the correct place, reanimated. Haven't used a custom hook so far. That's true. Yeah, I've just been using Reanimated and Gesture Handler and all of these amazing hooks that they've got built in. I've only had to create one component, by the way. I've just been like putting all of it in the app, but in order for context to work, I had to put one sort of provider on the outside of our component. So then I came up with a really brilliant name for the component called Slidey. It's like something that someone who's super tired would come up with. Okay, so useDerivedValue takes in as a dependency player vertical position. And now we also implement the callback for like how you compute the player vertical position. And it might have other dependencies as well. So we're going to basically take the player vertical position and divide it by the amount that the player can close. So collapsed player height is not it. Oh wait, open player position is separate from the player vertical position. So I got the names confused a little bit. Not a problem. Player vertical position and open player position. So these are the two values. And I'm not sure actually if you want to divide this one by that one or that one by this one. But I do know that because this one is the shared value, you have to do dot value. And that's what that squiggly line was telling me about. And here it's the same thing. You need to just refer to it as dot value. So it's either going to be wrong or it's going to be right. And it looks right. Yeah, so as I'm swiping, you can see the text is fading in and fading out. So that is a derived value, and we're going to use this for other stuff. We're going to use collapse progress to animate the blue box as well. Right? Right. So the blue box is our album artwork, and we're going to want to use a similar sort of technique here. We're just putting all of it in the same component. Like, this would be really tricky to break up into several components properly, or it'd be somewhat tricky because of all of these like interrelated dependencies. But what's nice actually is you can pass a shared value in as a prop. So some of this logic could actually be pretty easily broken apart into different pieces just by passing in these shared animated values as a prop to the children, like the collapse progress. But for now, we're just going to put all of these use animated styles in the same component because we ain't got time for that shit. Album art style. Yeah, that's clear enough. So the blue box here is going to be an array of styles, and it's going to take in the album art style. So we need the blue box to like go and jump up to this corner here. And now I'm really starting to regret laying it out in this way where this is the default thing and we're transforming from this state into the corner. Because depending on the size of the phone, like it would be pretty different. Depending on the size of the phone, like the amount that we need to transform is going to vary. So I might just like undo this and redo it. It's that way, like, because we already know the size of the screen, so we would have to back out like what is the current layout of this blue box. Well, for one thing we can do is like background color, we could just animate this pink thing because the math will be easier on this thing that takes the full width. And if we do some translations and whatnot on this outer box, I'm just convinced our life will be better. In most projects, it's 50-50. Either it's working or it's not working. If you're working with a power plant using Pluton to generate the power, you might get 99% on the working side. Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know going into it, like especially when you're coding and you just like jump into it. Like I'd do a little bit more research if I were building a nuclear plant, but for this you can just kind of experiment. We've only wasted like half an hour. It's only 3 a.m. So no big deal. So I'm going to take the album art style and I'm going to take it off of this blue square. And we can simplify it. This doesn't even need to be an animated.view. It can just be a view. We're going to keep it simple. Or we're going to make it simple. Now this album art style will be here inside of the outer box, the pink box. And we'll leave it pink just for a while because we're working on it. Hello, cat. Welcome. We're messing around with some animations. Earlier today we got this thing working where we can swipe up and swipe down on our album experience. And album art style, we don't need to animate the opacity. We're going to be animating the transform, and we're going to be doing some stuff to it. It's actually pretty good that we are rendering the full-size thing as the default, because if you translate up something that's small to the big thing, it'll look super pixelated. So maybe I am happy that we're doing it this way. Maybe I don't have to be too distraught and distressed. Well, I'm glad you've been enjoying it, Nick. Yeah, I missed your comment earlier. I'm having fun too. It's just, like, I don't know why I decided that this would be the best project or the best time to do it. I just got really excited when I saw how fast the internet is at this, like, cheap hotel. They say it's Denmark's largest budget hotel chain. Well, explain this to me. How does a budget hotel have this kind of internet speed? This is the fastest upload speed that I've basically ever experienced. And I'm on Wi-Fi and it has 5 millisecond ping. You can probably not see this very well, but it has a 5 millisecond ping. Like, I'm looking around like, where is the damn Wi-Fi router? Like, I should be able to smell the Wi-Fi. I'm just like, I got so excited when I saw this. I'm just like, let's stream. It's been a minute since I've streamed. I haven't streamed at all since I started traveling because it's just been so hard to find good workspaces. Like, even when I was in a WeWork, it was a very kind of a noisy environment compared to now. I'm in like a quiet hotel room. You guys won't even believe, fiber optic to the hotel, but also just even inside the hotel must have really, really good Wi-Fi setup. Maybe I'm lucky, maybe the router's right outside my door. I can't explain it, but I'm impressed by the whole networking stack here so far. Maybe they got really good Wi-Fi for this hotel because you wouldn't believe how many rooms are at this hotel. Like, I'm reading this stat off of the wall right here. It says there's 1,202 rooms, and the total number of beds is 2,500 basically. So, like, this is a huge hotel. I can't even believe when they said at the front desk they have 1,200 rooms. This is just absurd. So the collapse progress is basically goes from 0 to 1, I believe. I don't even know what direction it goes in. It's either goes from 1 to 0 or 0 to 1, but we're going to be doing some translation for it. So let's just try like doing a scale. Now, usually this wouldn't make any sense, but look, because it animates all the way down to 0. Because it's just, we're taking this value that goes from 0 to 1, and we're passing it into the scale transform that also goes from 0 to 1. So hey, this actually looks closer. This doesn't look too ridiculous. I mean, it looks ridiculous, but it's better than animating the opacity in this case. And we're also going to need to do a translate, so that way it goes up and to the left. So there's going to be a little bit of math involved, just a little bit. So I think what we'll do is we'll make it so that it just goes to the left corner of the player, and it's going to use the exact same hard-coded value of the collapsed player height. So we wanted to just kind of fill this lower corner once it animates. And we've got the right style for when it's open. So that means that 1 means the player is open and 0 means the player is closed. So that means this is like the open progress. I'm going to rename it from collapse progress to open progress. We can even just call it the open ratio. Yeah, because we know we're inside of the player. Just like, we don't need to call it the player open ratio. It's just the open ratio. What ratio is the player open right now? And that's how we're going to animate the scale. The problem is we need to understand how big this thing started in order to understand how to bring it down to the correct size of 100 by 100. But we know how big it started actually, and that's why we're using this pink box and not the blue box, because the pink box is the width of the screen. So let's go ahead and grab the width in the same way that we were grabbing the height earlier. So we know basically that we're going to combine these values and we're going to combine the open ratio in order to like understand the amount that we currently need to transform. So when open ratio is 1, okay, I wonder if they do have the interpolate, because React Native animations used to have this feature called interpolation, which was very helpful for this sort of thing. Ooh, interpolate. It was renamed in Reanimated 2 to interpolate node, and shouldn't be confused with interpolate. Well, let me just see what it does. Yeah, this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. Because there's this extrapolation clamp behavior, which comes in handy. It won't come in handy in this case, I don't think, but it can be very valuable. Okay, and you can use it directly inside of the use animated style, and you just import interpolate from Reanimated. So we're inside of the use animated style. So we want to interpolate. Interpolate, yes. So we're going to interpolate the open value. And what we want to say, basically, this is just helpful for, like, we could have done this with math, by the way, but it's just way easier to be explicit. So the input value, as the open value goes from 0 to 1, then the scale will go from something to 1. And we have to figure out what the something is. So this is just like kind of an explicit way. Like, this could have been done with really trivial math, but my brain just likes thinking in this way because I've thought in this way before. And yeah, so now to figure out the actual scale that we want to apply when it's closed, we just need to combine those two values that I mentioned earlier, which is the screen width and the gesture and the collapsed player height. So I think. So I'm just going to try doing a division with like that, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, this is not looking very good. what is up with that? Okay, I'm gonna try doing the opposite then. I'm gonna just try dividing in the opposite direction, and maybe, okay, well, it's hard to tell. It does not look like it's going down to 0 size. We're gonna lose says that, yeah, interpolate was also used in the assembler's book. I'm not sure what the assembler's book is actually. Yeah, maybe you can tell me a little bit about that. But so in addition to animating the size, because I assume that this is animating to the correct size, it's just hard to see, we need to animate up and over. So knowing how much to animate up is the tricky part, because there's all this like content in front of the album art. So maybe we can actually just hard code the distance between the pink box and the top of its area. So like hard code that height, because that's just gonna like simplify so much of the math that we're gonna have to do. But in addition to transforming the scale, we're gonna transform the translate x. This will be the quote unquote easy one. And I'm just gonna copy the same interpolate because, hey, it seems to be working. So as we go from 0 to 1, so 0 is the closed state because it's the open ratio. And so we're going to translate ultimately 0 pixels. We don't want to translate at all once we're open because it's already in the correct position once it's open. And here, just for fun, I'll just say -100. Hello? Oh, I see. It's complaining that I've put 2 different transforms inside of one object. And this is a slightly confusing API, but it's also very powerful because it means that you can apply several translations. Like if you wanted to do 2 different translate x's where they happen one after each other, you can do that. And also you can control, what's very important actually is you can control the order of which thing that's happening. And like React Native has it whack. I think it's been a bug in React Native since always, where the last rule gets translated first, and then this rule gets translated next. And you don't even want to know why it's never been fixed. Like, I think the reason that it's never been fixed is that if it were to be fixed, it would break a bunch of apps. And like nobody wants to upgrade React Native and like have all sorts of stuff be broken. So at no point in React Native's history have they been able to fix it. Like literally this should be the first thing that gets transformed and then the next thing, but it happens in the reverse order. Anyways, we're gonna lose says assembler is assembler, usually people refer to it as assembly, but yeah, exactly, a lot of them ready to be punched. I like how wow, you still have like a big stack of punch cards. That's badass. One of my favorite little fun facts in that domain is like how punch cards is the reason we have the 80 character width on terminals. Like even to this day, like the default terminal width or whatever is like the number of characters in one line is 80, and that comes from punch cards, which is ridiculous. And apparently punch cards themselves were chosen to be compatible with like certain like drawer or stationery. I forgot what it was, but like the size of a punch card was designed to be unique. So like, at some point I was reading about like all the history about like the shape and size of our screen, and like goes back to punch cards, but there was some reason that punch cards were that size as well. Okay, so as the open ratio goes from 0 to 1, oh yeah, what happens now? What does it look like? Oh, it's kind of, so yeah, -100, you can see it's moving off to the side, it's moving off to the left. But what we want is we want this pink section to just stick on the left edge there. And we can do this we have to do a little bit of math here. We have to think. We have to think. Um, so how far off is it? Because we can take it and we basically um, we can take we're going to be dividing the result by 2 because we're only moving half of it. I can't explain that, but basically I think we're going to take the screen width and we're going to subtract the destination size, which is the collapsed player height. So now what does it look like? Okay, that looks wrong. I was so confident in my math here. So the closed state, well, it needs to be negative, first of all. And this is always going to be a positive value. So I'm just going to break it down a little bit more clearly. Because first of all, it needs to be moved over. Let's just take this out of the equation and say screen width divided by 2. See what that does. Wow, it's so weird how it happens at like a different curve. I'm not sure if you're seeing what I'm seeing, but like the pink edge like goes in different directions. It goes like it curves. It like why is it doing this curve? I expected it to just be doing one motion, but here it seems to go outside of the edge of the app and then back in. Now, I think that the reason why is because we're actually translating it and then we're scaling. So let's start by scaling first, and then we'll translate. Okay, well, it still doesn't look like it's going. First of all, it's going in the wrong direction because we forgot to make it negative. And it's going too far off. But I think that fixed the main confusion. So it's really important that we actually are scaling first, and then we're doing the translation. So we'll say negative screen width divided by 2. And here, let's just go back to that same logic that I had before. The screen width minus this, minus the player size, the collapsed player height. Yes, yes, that's our translate x that is working. So now we just need to figure out what our translate y is going to be. So that way we can get it to go, so the damn album art will be visible when we collapse the thing. Wouldn't that be nice? I think that would be super ideal. He's getting delirious. He's getting delirious. It's the middle of the night. So let's start by making it so that this pink box is like a set distance from the top of the screen. Yes, exactly. None of these steps have been optional. Like these beautiful album things don't appear out of anywhere. I'm channeling my inner William Candelian. I'm like, can this be done in React Native? You have to believe. You have to believe. So time to hard code the height here. So what we can do is, here maybe we can do position absolute. How much does that break everything? Okay, maybe we don't want to do that. Well, because I just want to know like the exact number of pixels that this pink thing is off from the top. So there's a few different ways that could theoretically be done. The main problem is that this red text is here. Like if we just did a margin top of like, say just like 50 or like, well, whatever. Yeah, I'll just put in like 100. And then the animated text itself will, like, it can't be, it just needs to be outside of the layout system. So we can do position absolute for you. Is that 100 pixels? I don't know. I don't know. Is there a way that I can get the window to be, oh, pixel accurate? Point accurate. Okay, so now I'm going to use my handy measuring tool that may or may not take a screenshot. Okay, it's 125, 126, so I think the problem here is we have also some padding top that we can remove here for the sake of math. Good, now that's basically 100 pixels. We're going to lose. There's nothing wrong when to be wrong when programming, especially when you're working with the money. Then you're not allowed to be wrong. Yeah, that's true. You just need to have a lot of really good tests because you're still never going to write that perfect code. Yeah, if you're working on behalf of a bank, yeah, exactly. You got to be really careful in that case, but also, if you're working in one of those environments and they don't have systems of safety for you, then that's really scary. And like if you're working for a bank, you're expected to have really robust testing and procedures around how you make sure your code is robust. And that much is kind of on the organization more so than the individual developer. Like of course the developer should know, but yeah, no, it can be fun to be wrong. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so now we know that it's 100 pixels away from the top over here. So as far as how far we need to translate it up, we need to translate it up because it's being scaled down, and also we need to translate it for that top distance. And because it's one of those magic values, we're going to say album, we'll say art top offset. Because it's always nice to have these magic values documented up here, especially when two of the values are the same. Let's not even make it the same value. Let's say that the album art offset is 200 pixels, because then there's no way, like, we just need to make sure that we do the math right, and if there's too many values that are the same, then we might accidentally get the math wrong, but we won't notice it. Okay, so even though, yeah, now it looks nice. The album art is centered in the screen when the player is open. So we're going to add another translation, and it's going to be another translation that happens after the scale. It's confusing because it's literally defined above the scale, but it's going to happen after the scale. And again, we'll just copy and paste our interpolation. So we'll say that when the screen is closed, or when it's open, when it's 1, when the open ratio is 1, the translate will be 0. And we need to be doing translate y. This is going to be the last step of our animation work. We might mess around with trying to get this integrated into the navigation system, but I don't think we're going to be very successful with that because that involves creating a custom navigator, and like even though I know in great depth about how custom navigators are made, it's been a really long time since I've actually built my own navigator. So we might have to come back for a later stream on that one. So now what I'll just say is like the translate y will be minus the whole top, the size of the art. Did that do anything? Maybe it did do something, because it's not going down as far as it once was. Oh yeah, you gotta go. Yeah, exactly. Well, wow, that's really flattering. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for comparing me to Veritasium. Well, thanks for stopping in. We're gonna lose. So we've translated for the height of the art, but we also need to translate for all of us white guys look the same. I don't know what you guys are talking about. So we've got the art offset, but we also need to translate for the actual height of the art. Oh, and we know the height because it's the same as the screen width. Okay, let's see what happens now. Okay, good. Okay, we need to divide something by 2. Maybe the whole value actually needs to be divided. So I'll just take this whole thing and I'll divide that by 2. Oh, we're so close. Oh, we're so close I can smell it. Oh, I like what I'm seeing here. So the thing is I think only the screen width needs to be divided by 2 because we want to get rid of the entire offset from the art because we want we want it to just show up. Okay, well now this is did I change anything? That looks wrong but slightly differently wrong. Oh, I'm confused. I'm very confused. But it's like we're so close you can just taste it. The thumbnail looks too tall. Um, yeah, well, I think it's the right height. It just needs to be down 50%. It's like, but it's hard for me to think about the framing for that because it's like we're translating from this position, like this open position is the sort of starting point, and we're trying to figure out how much it needs to be moved up. And it can be really confusing because it's also interacting with the scaling that's going on. Because the scaling is happening first, and then we're also moving up basically after it's been scaled down. So it's scaled down to the collapsed player height divided by the screen width. I mean, also I can visually tell what's going on because we're using these big round numbers, and I know what 100 pixels looks like. I know what 50 pixels looks like. It needs to just be 50 pixels down, and that is half of the collapsed player height. So I don't know why we're interacting with collapsed player height here. Usually I can use logic to understand what's going on. Okay, it's a plus. It's a plus. It's a plus. We're so close. Oh my gosh, look, it fits in the corner now. Okay, so now we can get rid of the pink part because it's just going to look so much better if it just snaps to the corner. Nice. Now, it would be really nice if we could figure out how to get this to fit into the tabs. It's like once I got to a certain level, I got kind of excited. But I don't know. I think what I'll do is I'll take a quick break, and after the break, I'll come to a decision. Before I take the break, though, I just want to center this text because it's driving me crazy where it says podcast/album name. Like, this needs to be centered. And, like, text align center is here. But the problem is we've gone and made it position absolute. So it's really easy to fix. We just need to specify left 0, which is already implicit, I think. And then we do right, also 0. And that basically is going to say, hey, you need to fill the width, and then the text align will kick in. Okay? Good. This is refreshing. I mean, it still looks kind of bad because it's off screen. That's why I want to put it above the tab bar, because it's going to look so much nicer when it's above the tab bar. But I don't even know how to make a custom navigator anymore. That used to be like a whole thing that I knew how to do. And yeah, we would need to basically hack on the tab bar navigation. But I'm going to take a quick break. This has been really rad. I wish I could provide you with some entertainment or something while I'm going to the restroom and like eating a tiny amount. But just hang tight. Like maybe put on some music on your own computer. And yeah, ooh, oh, I can just play with this all day. So maybe when I come back from the break, I'll be calling it a night and wrapping it up, or maybe we'll mess around with the navigator. But this has been really fun. It's almost 3:30, so It's a little ridiculous that I started streaming at 1 a.m., but I'm glad. I know it's so satisfying. Um, and of course, I'm happy to share the code for this if anyone wants to play around with this on your own time. But I'm just going to take a quick break, and I'll see you all in just a second. Oh no, I don't even know. I can't even turn off my camera. Okay. Let's continue for a few more minutes. I'm having too much fun to put it down. I want to stop in the next like half hour or so, and we'll see if we can make a little bit more progress um, when it comes to integrating this in with the navigation, like I had promised at the beginning. Oh, well, thanks for warning me. Yeah, if you hadn't warned me, Nick, I would have just carried on with the audio not being loud enough. So I was rearranging the audio mixer over here because before I couldn't even mute myself because I'm using an iPad as a second display. Like, my setup is so whack. I had such an amazing setup back in California, and now I've just got, just the stuff that I can fit in my backpack, literally. Like the best gear that I could find that would fit in one bag, along with everything else that I am carrying around with me. I'm trying this nomad lifestyle out. We'll see how it goes for me. But I'm having fun so far. Especially fun when I can still do fun, streams and make good progress on this stuff. Just for the sake of sanity, actually, now we can maybe try changing this position, this art top offset. I'm pretty careful about which values I decide to hardcode. And I think in basically every music app, you kind of need to decide what is going to push what around when the screen gets bigger. And when the screen gets bigger, I think in this case, the design... Like, this stuff should get spaced out more. And of course, the width of the screen is what's defining the size of the album art. But the top, specifically, I think can be hard-coded. So right now it's 200. I'll just set it to like 120 or something. And let's make sure it still looks good. Is that 120? Yeah, I guess it's closer up to the top now. Let's just change it to 60. Okay, yeah. The art jumps up, but it still animates down nicely. It'd be cool to get a real album in there. And that'd be pretty easy to do. Maybe we can find some album artwork. But let's go back to the other app. There's app.tsx, which is what I've been working on, and there's appnav.js. So let's go back to using the navigation as the top level entry point. And it's called app.whatever. And I think that's defined... Well, that's a Expo thing, where it's just always going to be the thing that's called app. I'm trying to see if there's like a different entry point. But it's nice that like this is always the thing. I don't like it when things are magical, but just having something called app is pretty intuitive when you're making an app. So we'll rename this to Slidey. Pretty sure that's what I called the component itself, yeah? Slidey. So we'll say export default function, Slidey. And then we'll just delete this stuff at the bottom where the safe area provider was being exported. And we'll rename this back to app. So let's see if the simulator is freaking out. Okay, it looks like Expo may have crashed on some of this stuff. Metro, which is the build system here. Yeah, see, Expo has crashed. It's giving me a warning about that. The build tool does not like it when you rename files, especially important files like app.js. Okay, so we're back on our tab navigator. Now the question is, how can we get it so that above the tabs, the Slidey appears? Well, don't really know. Let's just try putting in a Slidey right here, just to see what happens, because it's not going to work. Oh, you can't find the variable Slidey. I get it. We can auto-import that. And again, it's complaining about the safe area provider. I thought the navigation container actually does the safe area provider, but it does not. No problem, we can go ahead and put in our own safe area provider. Okay, so now it's not really working because what's happening here is flex is happening. So basically this slidey is set to have a flex 1 on the outer container on the gesture detector. So maybe we can try. So for the sake of just understanding what's going on, I'm going to comment out the whole tab navigator so we can see slidey back in their beautiful glory. And we want to do a quick experiment on slidey. A few experiments where we're going to try removing this outer container, and as a result, the gesture detector needs to come in here. So we're kind of like rearranging our top level views here. Okay, and it looks like we haven't broken anything. That is such great news. So now that we've like rearranged like the way the components are sort of laid out, and this animated view thing that we're working on, that's the actual thing down here, it's going to have a different effect on layout compared to what we had before with the Flex 1 covering everything. So I'm going to just bring back the tab navigator. We'll see what it looks like this time. So here, technically, this is doing what we want it, right? Where the tabs, it's really hard to even see the tabs. Yeah, you're expecting me to come up with the answer. Well, it's gonna be a bit of an adventure. We've already made such good progress because the tabs are appearing under the slidey, and the slidey is still appearing correctly. But also, look, the tabs, they're only showing up in the margin, the unsafe area, which is really not where you need the tabs to show up. So ultimately, we're probably going to need to create our own tab navigator. But I'm curious what sort of stuff is built into the tab navigator itself. So for example, it looks like you can render a custom tab bar. And that's probably the most interesting thing, because I'm just looking at the TypeScript hints here. And so we could just render our own tab bar. Like, what happens if we just put slidey here? So now, basically, we have a tab navigator. But this whole thing is being rendered for the tabs. The problem here is we don't actually see the screens. We should see the actual screens behind us, but we're not right now. So I'm going to comment that part out. And yeah, so like the normal behavior shows the actual screens. So maybe when you render the tab bar, it gives you some interesting options here. No. Well, at least it's not telling me what comes in. Because you're rendering just the tab bar, and the tab bar should be the thing that appears below the screens. Yeah, I was hoping that we could get this working into the oh, you want to check out the safe area insets prop. I think this kind of allows us to override what it sees. So for example, what it considers its own safe area situation. So like the bottom, if we set that to 0, oops, I need to comment out the tab bar and then include the safe area insets. Yeah, so that basically allows us to override that. So if we wanted to put slidey under there, maybe the bottom could be like the actual safe area plus 100. But I don't think this is going to do what we want it to do. So like here, it's got a big old safe area. And this is telling it basically that we want the tab bar to fill in that area. So it's not even going to like show us the good stuff. So that's probably not it. When we specify our own tab bar, I'm just confused that the screen itself is not visible. And I wonder if that's Slidy's fault. Like, this is probably a problem. This is pushing other stuff out of the way. I don't know if we need this for layout reasons or not. I wonder what's going to happen if we just remove that. There's no behavior difference at all. So I'm glad I removed it because it didn't break anything, it seems. And what's interesting about the app, we can try exporting like a different version. So like there's function app nav, and then we can have just that we can quickly compare what it's like. Oh yeah. What we'll do is we'll always put this here. Oh, and now it's unhappy with some of the code. Okay, there we go. I forgot to remove that closing tag. What's interesting now is that the the safe area is having a kind of different effect. So this is why we had that view with Flex 1, is because it affects the layout of the initial layout of this thing. So here, the thing with view with Flex 1, what if we set this opacity to be 0? And then now that this layout guy is still here, but the opacity is 0 as opposed to the opacity, default opacity being there. Like, I'm not sure actually if the background color would have affected it, but we can try rendering app nav. If we render app nav, yeah, we still can't see when we're doing a custom tab bar. We're still not seeing the screen itself, but if we render a custom tab bar that's empty, no tab bar, this is like a functional thing, by the way. Sometimes you logically need something like tabs, but you can't actually, but you don't want to render the tab bar itself. You just like want to control that with code. That makes sense sometimes. And here the native stack navigator is continuing to work. No problem. That's nice. But something about like the tab bar, like what if we just, like I don't want to render a custom tab bar because the tab bar that is there by default looks good. It's a good tab bar. I mean, obviously the icons and the fonts and the colors, everything needs to change about it, but it's a functional tab experience. So just for fun, let's just see what it's like if we put it inside of the home screen, where like this actual screen, or no, this screen. What if the whole home screen just was slidey? Because at this point I just want something that looks like it's working, even if it's not actually working. Okay, slidey is not looking so good. It's not really even appearing on the home screen. Well, yeah, this is the sign that I was looking for, where I should have quit when I was ahead, because I can't see myself figuring this out in 10 minutes. But I'll continue to try, or we can just chat as well. It was definitely fun enough to get that animation and gesture stuff working. Like I learned a lot about React Native gesture handler and sort of regaining my comfort with the animation framework as it is now. And it's just so much better than it used to be. You remember when I was like wondering if console.log would even work. I was so skeptical that it would. But yeah, no, it's just gotten to be so much more robust. So one thing we can do is we can look at the actual implementation of the tab navigator. So it's inside of create bottom tab navigator. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into the code base basically for React navigation, if I can find it. I'm going to search this code base for create bottom tab navigator. So here's all the sort of construction for the bottom tab navigator, and it's much more abstract than it used to be. For example, there's all this logic around use navigation builder, which is something that I'm not very familiar with, but basically what you do is you give it a combination of the view that you want, which is like the actual thing that's rendering the whole navigator, which is rendering not just the tab bar, but also the screens above, and deciding which screen to render and how to render the transitions between those screens. And that is, I think, I thought the navigation builder basically, because it combines the router, because different navigators have different routing logic. So the tab router is something we definitely want to keep. I see, so here we're rendering the actual bottom tab view, and we've gone and gotten certain things out of use navigation builder. So that's, for example, what gives us the navigation prop, and it also gives us the navigation content. Who's using navigation content though? Oh, whoa. This is cool. Cool but confusing. I think this is mostly being used as a provider, navigation content, where it's providing different amounts of context to the children here. And bottom tab view is who we would want to be replacing. And then it's also create navigator factory. So, I don't know. It's kind of a scary thing to do, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just maybe try copying this whole file into our code base. And maybe maybe that'll work. Create slidey tab navigator. Because it's got such an excellent name here. I'll just do the whole thing. Create slidey tab navigator.tsx and dump in this whole thing. And a bunch of these things probably can't be imported properly. So bottom tab view, for example, I will try to import that from the actual place where it comes from. Okay, good. Bottom tab does export that individually. That's what's nice, is that React navigation is meant to be customized in this way. Okay, so then these other things are types. Hopefully these types can be imported directly as well from React navigation. Okay, bottom tabs, good. Good, I have faith. I have faith. Okay, so we're exporting default create navigator factory. And yeah, we've just kind of copied and pasted code directly from React navigation into our code base. And I'm hoping that this will work, because this is kind of what we need to customize. We need to customize bottom tab view, but we don't necessarily have the ability to customize it until we can have control over this snippet of code. And we're well on our way. So instead of creating, now we can go ahead and import this thing that we just created. We didn't create it, we just forked the file. And yeah, so we probably won't have Slidey at all in here, but hopefully we continue to have a working tab navigator. Okay, it's working. Yeah, so let's also go fix our home screen by kind of undoing the junk that we did before. Okay, so we have a functioning tab navigator. We just need to come in here and change some of this stuff. Like maybe what if we put a view here with a style set to something like background color, like, or set a height. Okay, the reason autocomplete isn't working is because I haven't imported the view. So when your editor is not helping you, it's usually because you haven't given the editor what it needs to know. And now my life is easier because I can autocomplete all of these things. Okay, look at this. This is, oh, huh. As soon as I added that view, like I can no longer tap on the tabs. And just to confirm that, I'm going to comment it out. And now I still can't tap on the tabs. So when did this break? Okay, the tabs are working. Now maybe I'll just put it afterwards, because I'm just doing some experimentation. Yeah, so interesting that inserting this view breaks the navigation logic. It's preventing these tabs from working. And I don't think this view is, so to speak, like physically occluding these buttons. It's not like these buttons are not being pressed. It's just that they're not working when they attempt to do the navigation logic. So my guess is that navigation content has some special stuff going with bottom tab view that's just not working. So bottom tab view is another thing that we should probably go fork, basically. It's not fun to like fork extra stuff that might not be necessary, but I think it's necessary in this case. Okay, so if we come back up to views, bottom tab view. This is probably a pretty big file too. Yeah, so here there's the opportunity to render the tab bar. And this is the function that the user can override. Tab bar height, callback context. Holy crap. That's confusing. So it seems like there's some ability to sort of see changes to the callback or to the height of you can observe the height changes of the tab bar itself. And then there's the header, which remember we've disabled for some of the screens, but for other screens, for other tabs, we haven't actually disabled the header at all. Yeah, it's interesting that even after like the hot reload of removing that blue view, it didn't work. So I had to do a full reload in order to experience the working tab experience. Okay. And you can also set a scene container style. Yeah, but that's just a style rather than like a full wrapper to every scene. So I think we are doing the right stuff here, but I also like don't feel like I'll be able to follow through with this very well. So I think this is a good opportunity to wind things down, and just for the sake of like feeling successful, I'm going to comment out the navigation stuff and put in Slidey because Slidey was such an accomplishment for us today. So I appreciate you for hanging out, Nick. And yeah, hopefully we can get to work on some Zurv stuff, which I've been neglecting tonight at least. But it'll be good to get back to that. I've been working on some really exciting stuff with regarding Zurv and the developer experience there. Um, so actually, like the other day, when I was hanging out with some of the expo people in Amsterdam, I had this really cool experience where like I got to experience my own product for the first time, where it was providing type safety for me, like as a consumer of the content management system. Um, so yeah, when you test Spotify and open the player, the tab navigator increasingly slides out. I'm curious what you mean by that. Like I can also open up Spotify. But yeah, I don't think Spotify has nearly as nice of a transition as what we have here. Like I think YouTube Music is the sort of world class example. Um, but I'm really happy we managed to get this shared element transition kind of working. It kind of bothers me that the text intersects um, with the album, and that's actually pretty easy to fix. It's just not going to happen right now. Um, but yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So next time I might continue working on this and trying to get this integrated with the navigation system, because that's one area where I'm particularly well suited to handle. Like I'm very comfortable jumping into the navigation code because I helped create React Navigation back in the day. I've not been maintaining it. Yeah, so I mean, for Spotify and their custom tab navigator, I'm not sure I'm not, they're using a bunch of native code for this app. So it's hard to know like how they do it. In fact, they wouldn't frame it in the sense of a navigator, and I'm not really, or in the sense of a custom navigator. And I don't know quite as much about native code as I do about React Native, so I'm not sure. And it's also different on platform to platform. Um, so yeah, with React Navigation, we came up with our own abstraction basically for React Native, and in the hopes that people would make lots of custom navigators. Um, there wasn't a lot of people making custom navigators, but a few people have, and it's definitely possible to, basically just by following along the same methodology you saw me start on tonight with basically copying code from React Navigation and then forking it where it's necessary, because React Navigation is already built in a super modular way, where you can compose different navigators together. Like, of course, you've already seen that happen here, where the stack navigator was literally inside of the tab navigator, and that makes sense because when you change tabs, that whole stack gets preserved in there. And React Navigation is infinitely composable, so in theory you can create custom navigators to do all sorts of crazy stuff like you see with the sort of list and detail pattern that you have on iOS, and including cool things like the music stuff. Like I think this is actually a really great example of like what you can do with a custom navigator. So I would like to get back to this, but also I would like to get back to my main project, which is Zurv. I'm just so excited. Like, it's crazy that I've like started and stopping working on Zurv for a very long time. It has a new name now, a new image, and a new focus where I'm trying to do content management system for just like JSON configuration data. So it's like a very specific type of CMS. And yeah, I've got a whole lot of sort of communicating to do to sort of get those ideas across. But Nick, I definitely appreciate you hanging out tonight, and for the other people in chat who are probably no longer around, but it's been a lot of fun, and I feel like we all learned something tonight, and I'm happy to have you collaborating on Zurv. So thanks for the time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The videos are fine. They're just kind of old, and they're not old. They're like 2 months old. But I'm just kind of rambling in them. So I don't really have a very clear methodology for how I produce the videos and what to do. But yeah, well, Cat, I'm glad you're still around as well. And yeah, thanks for the flattering comments with regard to Veritasium, whatever. But yeah, it's about time for me to get some sleep. It's just turned 4. So thanks so much for joining, everyone. And oops, let's go back to the camera view. And yeah, I'll see you in the next stream. Not sure when it'll be, but I hope to make them more frequent. I'll try to prioritize getting good internet and then coming on and making some good content. So thanks for joining, and I'll see you all around.